1997, when the Prius was first created in Japan, there's been over 2 million sold worldwide. In the United States, it was introduced in 2000, late 2000, as a 2001 model. Since that time, with those million Priuses on the road, over 97% are still running today. The key to the Prius lineup, in my opinion, is that it's saved over 900 million gallons of gasoline over what all of those owners could have purchased as an average fuel consumption vehicle. And that means instead of getting 22, they're getting between 46 and 50. Think of it, almost 1 billion gallons were saved just because they chose a different type of car. And I have to thank all of you, or any other Prius owners in here, which I know a lot of you are here, for doing that. And now they've expanded. It's not just the Prius hatch or liftback. You got the Prius plug-in, you got the Prius V, and now the Prius C that's just come out. And of course, I hate to mention, you know, that we kind of skip over the Toyota Camry hybrid, but it's also another choice for somebody looking for a sedan instead of a hatch and maybe a little bit larger size versus anything but the V. And with that, I'm going to try to give you some techniques that you can employ on your way home, on the way to work, and these are lessons for a lifetime. I'm going to try to make you guys not only more fuel efficient drivers, but more aware, safer drivers. And in the process, that's what this program is all about. And it's specific to the Prius in most cases, but you can drive any vehicle much more fuel efficiently than the average driver. You can drive your Priuses to some astounding numbers, and we'll talk about those during this presentation. I'm sure we're all concerned with our local environment. Something that the Prius does is it has low emissions, both NOx and hydrocarbon, also CO2. We've all heard about LA and its smog problem. Well, what about Dallas? Who ever heard about Dallas having a problem? That's Dallas on a emissions day when they're having problems versus what it could be every day. Are you concerned about peak oil? Some people may not even know what peak oil is. It doesn't mean you run out, it just means the cost of it and the supply and demand are out of whack. We're kind of getting into that now. That blue line up there, that's our US production over the last 70 years. It peaked in 1970. The second hump there is Alaska. That peaked about 12, 14 years ago. It used to produce 2 billion barrels a day. It's now down to less than 600 million barrels per day out of Alaska. A lot of unconventional tar sands from Alberta. They're going to help. None of them are the solution though. Prius does help remove some of that hit. That red line there is what we've been importing, and it blew through what we've created quite a while ago. We import more than 60% of our, I should say, between 50 and 60%, depending on whose numbers you look at. That's what we import today. And think of it as a Al-Qaeda collection box at the gas station. Every time you go there, you drop a few nickels into the Al-Qaeda collection box, and we all love Al-Qaeda, right? That's my reason for being, is what happened on 9/11. It's security of our nation. We're giving over $1/3 trillion, and that, at the prices that we're paying today, it's not long before we'll give over $500 billion a year to foreign oil producers, OPEC being one of them. And some of that dollars, they're recycled in not so good areas. Are you concerned about the future of our planet? This is a CO2 global warming issue. If you don't believe it or you don't believe in it, science has some proof that says it's happening. Again, the Prius family is helping reduce that for your given drive by emitting less CO2 for every mile that you travel. Or this is key to all of us. Would we simply like to put more money in our pockets? You know, who wants to pay 50 bucks a week when we pay 30 bucks a week? Or if you're paying $30 a week, wouldn't it be nice to pay 15? Unfortunately, most people are paying $100 a week when they could be paying 30. And this affects all of us, and it's one of the hooks that this program is going to save you at the pump, and again, make you a more aware and safer driver as you go through. Okay, thank goodness many of you already own Toyota Priuses. It's a good thing. Now, what is hypermiling? You may have read stuff about, you know, it's NASCAR out on the highway or something like that. It's not NASCAR. Hypermiling simply means beating the EPA of the car that you own and drive. The Prius Gen 3, that's a 50 mile per gallon vehicle. If you beat 50 miles per gallon, you're a hypermiler. Saying that, not all people can, and it's not expected that you can, but if you can do the best you can for every time that you push the button or turn the key, that's all we can expect, and I hope that makes a lot of sense to everybody. Okay? Now, fuel economy hasn't changed much in 20 years. Vehicles have gotten higher performance, heavier weight, more features, sunroofs and heated seats and all that stuff. And the average fuel consumption for the fleet in the United States, the light duty fleet, is somewhere around 22 miles per gallon. Prius is, between 40 and 50. All because you changed the car that you drive. You didn't change any habits, you didn't do anything different. It's just a change in the vehicle that you own versus the average driver out there. This number is going up. As of last month, the average new car purchase is up to 24 miles per gallon. Prius is off of 50 right now. So it kind of gives you a perspective. When we do reviews, I do reviews on pickup trucks with big engines, big motors. I don't do any high performance automobiles, sedans or anything, because I think that doesn't make any sense. But for those that need a contractor truck, the Tundra is perfectly good if you need that vehicle. Just make sure that your wants and your needs match, that's all. And in most cases, the wants don't meet the needs, and a Prius certainly meets the needs 98% of the time. Consider if you do have to haul something every once in a while, go rent a pickup truck, but drive that Prius 98% of the time. I know somewhere over here we're talking about your Camry hybrid, and you have something a little bit more guzzler worth at home. You use your Camry hybrid most of the time, as you should. What is the EPA fuel economy rating? When you go to a new car, and you can see them on every new car in this lot, there's a thing called a Monroney sticker on there. It'll have stuff about the cost of the car, the options, sometimes a crash test rating. It'll also have a fuel economy number on it. Where does that number come from? It comes from a specific test that is run on that vehicle by the manufacturers, and then the EPA checks about 15% of those vehicles to make sure that the manufacturers aren't lying. And believe me, they've tested every single Prius that's ever been built to make sure that Toyota's not saying it's 50 when they only got 48. It's a 50 mile per gallon vehicle on the EPA test cycle. It's a car, it's sitting on a dynamometer, it's indoors, and we're going to go over some of the positives and negatives of doing that. This is an EPA city test, and I don't know if all of you can see it back here, but that's just the schedule. As they start from 0 miles an hour, they go up to 30, they go down to 0, they go up to 60, they go back down to 0, they go back to 40. And this occurs at 68 to 86 degrees. That's perfect temperature for high fuel economy. They're already given the advantage to the EPA that we don't get. Do we drive in 10 degrees, 0 degree weather sometimes? We certainly do. This didn't take into account that kind of driving. And you can see that the average speed is about 20 miles per hour. This is a city test designed prior to 1969, and it's a loop through the Los Angeles area in 1969. This is the schedule that they come up with. They still use this test today as one of 5, but right now, for up through 2008, this was the key city test cycle. This is the highway test. Now this looks a little normal. You start at 0, you speed up, you're going up to a high speed of 60 miles an hour. How many people exceeded 60 today? No, I did. We're out on the interstate, we're all exceeding 60 miles an hour, but this is how our fuel economy numbers were based from 1985 through 2007. And again, perfect temperatures, no AC, top speed 60 miles an hour. That's not the way people drive nowadays. So you have this number that was based prior to 2007. It was way up there. The Prius Gen 2 that some of you had, you may have, when you purchased it, had a EPA combined number of 55. And then it went down to 46, and you're like, why did that happen? You're going to find out in just a minute. Okay, so you see these EPA test cycles, and what they do is they don't measure the fuel economy of the car, they measure the emissions coming off of the car, they measure how much CO2 is in there, and then they convert that to miles per gallon. That's how it's actually done, and all manufacturers do that, and the EPA, that's what they spec. With this number being, 60 mile per hour high speed, really gentle acceleration and deceleration, the city test would average 20 mile per hour. It wasn't realistic. So in 1985, they had to add some offsets to try and make it more realistic. But as Americans, as we grew into the 21st century, we started driving faster and harder. And cars, instead of having 11.5 second average 0 to 60 time, they're down in the 9-second range. So we're driving harder acceleration, harder deceleration. So the EPA test cycles had to catch up. And so they created these offsets. But even the offsets didn't make any sense. on any vehicle to beat its EPA back in 2007 was tough. And nobody or very few people did. Europe's even worse. But here in the United States, they came up with 3 new tests to try and come and master that problem. And the fact that we drive faster, we drive harder, we're driving more inefficient, and we're driving with AC on more of the time. We know people that drive with AC on in the winter to defrost their windshield, and they keep it going. Things like that aren't accounted for in these EPA tests, so they created 3 more. Now, this is the high-speed test. And what it is a very fast acceleration to 40, and then a very fast deceleration to 0. That acceleration in most vehicles is wide open throttle, and then off and on the brakes to maintain that test cycle range. Then they go all the way up to 70, back to 0. Then they have a high speed of 80. At least this is kind of matching what's going on in the real world. But this is only one of 5 tests, and it's incorporated all together. So this is what they did beginning 2008, is they started incorporating these 3 extra tests, and this is the first one, the high speed test. Then we have the AC test. Remember those previous cycles, they never used AC. Back in 1969, there weren't many vehicles with AC, or if you did, it was an expensive option. Today, it's standard on almost everything, especially Prius lineup. You can't buy a car. I don't think in all Toyota you can buy a car without AC. Maybe they could tell me that or not, but most vehicles come with AC, and we use them. And it was never in the history of the EPA test cycle taken into account. And even on a Prius, using AC can take down up to 10% of your fuel economy. On a Honda Insight Gen 1, using AC dropped fuel economy by 50%. It was never before used, they never took into account. Now they do. So that new EPA sticker, it takes into account AC use. And then the big one, the cold test. Again, before it was all 68 to 86 degrees, perfect temperature for the best fuel economy. Another thing they use non-ethanol fuel. That's hard to get. I heard you do have a station around here, and I recommend that. But 98% of the vehicles on the road today use ethanol-laced fuel, and it lowers your fuel economy, so it's even harder to meet what we normally get. But this cold test was the first one that put these cars in a box for 24 hours, cold soaked them, and then they start up and go on this test, accelerate, decelerate, accelerate, decelerate. So it gave a more realistic picture of the way that we drive our vehicles today. Did I skip one here? Okay. Again, it's a 20-degree Fahrenheit test, and it gives you an idea that now, hey, they're bringing some more realistic test cycles into this to make that Monroney, that sticker that's on the side of a brand new car, to make it more realistic. And even today, we're starting to outpace that because people are driving even faster and harder acceleration and deceleration. So when you see a Monroney sticker, about 85 to 90% of people should fall within 10% of that number in their daily routine. There's outliers on the top, there's outliers on the bottom, and all we're going to try to do is teach you how to be one of the outliers to the top side to save you money at the pump. So you know about how the stickers numbers are created and why that sticker is on there. It's mandated to be on that vehicle. The key here though is if you don't have to turn the key or push the button, you're the best hypermiler there is. Those that never consume, they bike, ride, they walk, if they can take public transportation, and I do that when I can. When I fly into LAX, I use the little Google map thing and it has a little public transport button there. I hit that first to see if I can get from point A to point B before I even touch a car. But when we do have to touch the keys or we have to push the button, we're going to teach you some stuff here. About 3 times a year, what we do is we make arrangements with a local Walmart in a very astute, a very high-end area. This isn't a lower income area, but a higher income area, so you think that their cars would be better maintained. And what we find in this Pump Your Ride program, we ask them as they go in, would you like, after you leave, for us to check your tire pressures and fill them up to placard or more if you'd like. And out of, let's say, 200 cars that we do in a single day, 75% of the tires are underinflated. 75%. This is affluent area. Cars have been well maintained. That's costing us 2 to 3% of our fuel consumption in the United States just because our tires are low. When I do a vehicle setup, I like to go max sidewall. People say, well, doesn't that screw up your tires? Doesn't that screw up handling? In most cases, no. There's positives and negatives, and we'll talk about that probably tomorrow. But what I want you to know is that as soon as you fill your tire up to the placard pressure that's listed on the side of your car, 10 minutes later, it's already leaking some of that air out. 3 months later, it's leaking more. And in the wintertime, especially, if you bring it into a garage and you have that tire filled up with warm air from inside that garage, the compressor's drawn from inside somewhere, That's 70-degree air going into that tire. You drive it out, for every 10 degrees drop in temperature, you lose about a pound. So you could drive literally 5 miles and you're 5 pounds underneath the placard. That's a dangerous situation you don't want to be in. Okay? Then we have junk in the trunk. Oh, we'll talk about synthetic. Nowadays, all the Priuses recommend 0W20. That's what's recommended for the car, and that's a good thing. The older Priuses, they didn't have that, but I recommend using 0W20 even in your older Priuses, and you can use it as a swap for 520. It doesn't affect your warranty. It does give you better fuel economy. Don't just go into Jiffy Lube and say, so, fill it up, because I have a 1995 coupon this week. Don't do that. And there's 2 reasons. One is the fuel economy reason, but 2, there's a wear item. If they put their general 5W20 or 0W20 in there, I'm going to say 5W20, it may not be synthetic. And that synthetic, the non-synthetic breaks down quicker, and the additives in there will not protect that engine as much as synthetic. And that's why nowadays you can go 10,000 miles under non-severe driving condition in a Prius using 0W20. Extend your oil change. It's less problem for the environment if that oil wasn't recycled properly. And 2, you get better fuel economy. So always make sure that they're putting in 0W20 into that vehicle and it's a synthetic oil. Now this junk in the trunk, the reason why I say junk in the trunk here, my daughter-in-law, she came over and she had an old Grand Prix. She's now driving a Yaris, thank goodness. But she had an old Grand Prix. She said, well, I'm getting like 16 miles a gallon. And I looked it up and it was rated like 22 or something else. Let's do the setup on it. Tires were low. The thing that I noticed most though is I went to the back and said, okay, let's see what's in your trunk. The trunk was completely filled to the top with books. There was at least 1,500 pounds of books in this car. And I said, what the heck is going on here? She says, well, that's all my college stuff and I wanted to keep my, I said, not in your car, please. 10 minutes later, we had all those in the driveway. They haven't been in that car, and then she traded in, thank goodness. But she now knows that she was carrying probably 1,500 pounds for nothing, and we don't have to. On an EPA test cycle, Ford and their Ford Escape Hybrid, if they added an additional 100 pounds over the 300 pounds allotted, it would see a loss of 1 mile per gallon on the Monroney. So weight is a big deal. What we see in the real world, probably less than 1 mile per gallon, but any amount of weight that's extra, that's excess, get it out. If you're going to go golfing on Saturday, don't put your clubs in on Monday. Put them in on Friday or Saturday, and then take them out when you're done. That's all we got to do. It's simple as that. Oh, okay. A fuel consumption display. Fortunately, Priuses have. Knock that out. Fortunately, Priuses have fuel consumption displays. Non-Prius vehicles, you can add fuel consumption displays that give you even more information. In fact, some of the best hypermilers in Priuses and Hondas in particular, they use these fuel consumption displays to really push the limits. And you're going to see some numbers up here as what you can use these fuel consumption displays for, even in a Prius, because the displays that they give you sometimes aren't specific enough. And I know he's back there, he's drooling and saying, I'm going to have to get some of those things because he's got to get more than 85 miles per gallon out of the seat. But again, putting all these things together, just vehicle setup, you haven't changed your habits one bit, but you have a feedback device. You've got the junk out of the trunk. You've got the right oil, the right level. You've got your pressures and your tire pressures up. We see on Clean MPG, somebody that comes in and just does this, they gain 15% or more in fuel economy just because they change the setup of their vehicle. Just the setup alone can give you an extra 15%. And it's the same thing in a Prius. If you set your vehicle up, you're going to get another 2 to 3% versus what you are today, just because you change the setup of the vehicle. Okay? With that, think about what that 15% does. You know, instead of paying $4 a gallon to drive a certain distance, now you're paying $3.25 to drive a certain distance. Now, if somebody were to put a local gas station around here were to put $3.25 a gallon, guess where all of us would be filling up this afternoon? At that gas station, instead of somebody else paying it, you know, at $3.80 or whatever it is today here in this area. Now, we're going to go over some basic hypermiling techniques, and these are the things that you've probably heard on CNN and ABC and online, anywhere. But this is the kind of stuff that the talking heads like to speak, but do they walk the walk? Have you ever seen somebody ask one of these talking heads, well, what do you get in fuel economy? And have they ever answered? They don't, because they usually don't even know. And 2, they have no idea what fuel economy is anyways. That's what we're here to change. We're here to teach you about what's going on with your vehicle, why it's getting the fuel economy it is, and how you can improve that. So with that, speed. You know, we all know what the speed limit is, and most of us exceed it. And in many cases, I see it not just by, you know, a trucker that's independent, but constables, police, troopers, big rigs. They're all going over the limit in my area. Here in the Chicago area, we're all 55 miles per hour. I might be the only one on the road traveling between 50 and 55 miles an hour out of a million drivers until the congestion hits. Speed does kill fuel economy. You're going to see some stuff here in a minute. I have something above there about do not accelerate or brake quickly. And that's a rule of thumb that just makes sense no matter what you own and drive. Even in a Prius, even though you have regenerative braking, you brake hard, you don't get that all back. It's a lossy solution. And we can save fuel by braking gently versus hard braking, and we'll show you some more on that. Okay. Then we've got cold weather. And some of us were talking this morning about block heaters. Cars don't become fuel efficient and cold until they're warmed up. That doesn't mean you start your car and let it run out, you know, with your remote starter until it's warmed up. That's not what you do. You want to start the car and drive away gently, but immediately. And the same thing in a Prius. You don't want to just sit there and idle away, even though it's doing that for emission control. Once the coolant temperature has to get to 141 degrees before that car gives you all the hybrid functions that it's capable of doing. Before that, it's a regular car with a small engine. And as you know, and I'm sure you've all started your Priuses up on a cold morning, and she idles really high and she stays there for about a mile or two, and then everything comes back. It's just because it's trying to bring your emissions down. There's ways to cure some of that, and we'll go into a little bit more, but try not to allow that thing just to idle away for no good reason and let it sit there. Get in and go. You got your gloves and your hat on to go out your car in the middle of winter. Go with your gloves and hat on and then take them off as the car warms up with you while you're driving down the road. Okay, skip some there. Okay, yeah, we're good. Now, more basic techniques. We talked about AC. AC can knock off about 10% in your Prius hybrids. If you don't need AC, how can you get around that? One way is we use cross ventilation. I lower my driver's side window about 1 inch, and I lower the back rear window about 1 inch, and I get crossflow with that. After that, I start upping the vent fan until I can't stand it anymore. My tolerance for heat is a lot more than most people. I mean, if it's 118 and I'm in a competition, I'm not going to use AC, but there are times going down a mountain when you want to use AC, cool the cabin because it's free, you're going to throw it away anyways. Question?
I thought the AC was electric.
It is electric. But
why does that affect my mileage?
Because the gasoline engine, or the gas that you put into the tank, works through the engine to produce that electricity. You actually, to get that electricity, it's produced from the gasoline that made that car go. So that's where you get hit. But you get hit a lot less than somebody that owns a non-electric equipped AC unit on a vehicle. So AC on a Prius, it hurts you, just not as bad as it hurts somebody else. So again, cross ventilation first, then start cranking the vent fan. Don't have, if there's no passengers, don't have their vent directed. Shut that vent down and leave it to you. Again, it helps, okay? Then we got remove the cargo and racks. And this is something that we do see some Prius drivers do, is they add racks so they can add stuff on the top. Man, that hurts. Not only does it add weight, aerodynamics, the aerodynamics just they just get destroyed when you do something like that. Anytime you see an SUV driving down the road, it's got a rack full of stuff on the top. They could have put a little trailer hitch unit on the back and put it on the back in most cases, and it wouldn't affect them. But again, Priuses are really optimized for fuel economy. You don't want to put stuff hanging on the back or off on the top. Fortunately, they don't have racks there for that, so that's a good thing. But consider very carefully before you put some ski racks up there if you were ever to consider that. Okay? Accessory running. We're not just talking AC, but and I'll give you this as an anecdote. Again, this goes back to a Ford study. When they were doing the Ford Escape Hybrid, their first hybrid, by running the radio on the EPA test cycle, they lost 1/10 of a mile per gallon. The radio. It can show up, doing the data analysis, you can actually see that running a radio costs you fuel economy. I'm not saying don't run your radio, but every little accessory that you run, if you're going to run the rear defrost, if the window's clear, shut it down. Don't wait for the auto timeout. If you're going to run the AC, consider running it at a higher temperature so that it's not continuously, running at full blast. Radio use, you have to have it cranked. Some kids are, I'm going to put a 360 watt unit in here. Fortunately, we don't have to do that, and a good thing is Prius is, nowadays you have a choice of going to Guiness, a very efficient high power amp system in some of the higher end Prius trims. And again, it's just they're trying to make the average vehicle work for your average lifestyle without costing you fuel economy. But everything we use costs something. Remember about that speed kills fuel economy number? Here's some numbers from the Toyota Prius 2, the second gen, 2004 through 2009, and then the 2010 through 2012. 50 miles an hour, that Toyota Prius 2 at 50 miles an hour, flat road and perfect temperatures, no wind, 68 miles per gallon. At 60, it drops to 61. That's significant. And the same thing with the third gen here, 66 down to 61 as speeds climb. That crosses over as the higher speed because of the new Prius is more efficient, higher speeds. But that gives you an example of the difference between 50 and 60 miles an hour. There's been a DOT study out, and they were talking to people that say they average 65 miles per hour versus those that average 55. Nobody averages 65 miles per hour, because if they did, when they came in to park in their garage, they'd go right through the back of their garage, through the neighbor's fence, and land in the neighbor's pool. And of course, we don't do that. Average speeds for somebody that travels at 65 miles per hour on the interstate versus somebody that travels 55 miles per hour on the interstate, on average, across the country per the study, they showed a 3 mile per hour difference in average speed. It's not 10. It's 10 for that small segment on the highway. But with congestion, every stop sign that you go when you go through your subdivision and get back in your house, that's how little that higher average speed works for you. You know, going between maybe here in New York on I-80 where you can set cruise at 70 and go, that'll show up. But for everybody's average everyday commute, that 10 miles per hour that they speed on the interstate, they only get 3 mile per hour average speed boost from it. So consider that. This is a big deal. The difference between 68 and 60 is a big deal. Okay, we're going to talk about face-out parking. When you park a car in a Walmart parking lot, in a Home Depot, wherever you go, there's people that pull into the normal slot nose to nose with everybody else. And then there's people that pull through to the second spot. Now they go off and they do their shopping and they come back and they get in their car, and guess what they get to do? They look both ways and they pull out and go. The people that park nose to nose, they got to back up. What's back there? I'm looking at the rear view camera. If you don't have a rear view camera, you're looking around, there's people driving all over the Home Depot, they're going crazy. You're looking around and then you go forward. Just that little bit. You know, even if you're doing it on electric, remember that electricity comes from the gasoline that you put in your tank. So you don't want to waste it. Always pull through, if it's legal, into the second spot, so that when you get back in your car, you have a clear view of the front, there's no chance to run over anybody, and you just go. Perfect setup, and very few people use that, but if it's available to you, definitely use it. Okay? I got, when you're at home, I want to talk about the garage. If you can back your car in when it's warm, so that you can face out or go forward in the morning, it's best to do it when it's warm, when it's efficient. When it's fully efficient, your Prius is a 50 mile per gallon OPEC fighting machine. And when it's warm, you can back up so that in the morning when you take off, if you can face forward, do it. So if you have the opportunity of where you have to face in at some point, consider backing into that spot if it is in your garage. You know, I'm not saying you have to do that, but it's just another consideration. It's a lot easier driving forward in the morning than when you have to just kind of think about that warm-up hit is hurting you and you're backing around and you know the engine's running really high and you haven't even accelerated out of your driveway. That stuff really hurts. It really does. Okay. Potential parking. Again, think about these large parking spaces that we have available to us in grocery stores and movie theaters and home, home shops. Sometimes there's a little higher elevation on that parking lot than other areas. Now, this is what I want you to think about. You're coming in there at 20 miles an hour and you coast down to a stop at the highest point. You didn't use your brakes. You just kind of coasted up to the highest point. Now you go in and you shop, you bring in, you load your car up with stuff. Now you have a little bit of a downhill to accelerate away. And I'm going to show you something how you may not have to use your gas engine at all to probably get out of the parking lot. But if there's a parking lot with a little bit higher elevation at one point than the other, park in the high elevation spot. And I highly recommend in all parking spots, make sure they're in the back. Don't park up in the front with all the people running in and out of the stores. It's the worst place you can be. There. I was doing a manufacturer test for competitive comparison drive for another manufacturer. And this was coming out of San Diego on the I-15. This is over the Cajun Pass. And I know it's hard to see, but there's a truck about maybe 4 or 5 seconds ahead of me here. I'm climbing in the truck lane. Speed limits are 65 here. I'm in the truck lane. He's got his E-flashers on. I did too. Going 35. You say 35, that's too slow, that's too slow. I only had to do it for about 1.5 minutes. But I got this vehicle up that mountain above its EPA highway. And this Cajun Pass is over 4,000 foot. Okay, I drove this thing from sea level to 4,000 foot above the EPA by using this truck climbing drive with load lifestyle or mindset. Think about that. How hard do you have to rush that car? You know, are you in a race to the top of the mountain? Some might say, well, it's 65 versus 55 or 50 or 35 or whatever it is. If there's a truck climbing lane, usually that's a 4 or 5% grade. That's huge, and you're gonna see your fuel consumption displays go down to 15, 20 miles per gallon. But if you slow down, you'll see them at 25 or 30. And on the backside, you're gonna gain a lot of that back. So just consider that. If there's a truck climbing lane, do I really need to race up this hill, or can I get in the truck climbing lane and slow down a little bit? You don't have to slow down by 5, 10, you know, you might do 2 or 3. But I will slow down to the slowest speed truck. I'll just stay way back and just climb with them because I'm not in a race to anywhere. I know my route. I know what time I leave in the morning and what time I'll get to work. I can slow down for these monster hills, and you guys have some huge ones. Fortunately, in Illinois, we don't have these, but out here in Washington State, you certainly do, and California has them, and of course, Colorado, the whole Rockies and Sierra Nevadas are filled with them. But consider that. They're truck climbing lanes. Climb with them, and we're going to show you some of the results of that climbing in a later slide. Did anybody see what just happened there? What it was a crash test, an NHTSA crash test. That's a 2007 or 2008 Honda Civic Hybrid. Getting destroyed. It hit a wall at 35 miles an hour, and it's completely destroyed. They're going to take that to the junk pile. When we stop from 35 miles per hour, and we're hard on those binders, that amount of energy is being expended. We're just throwing it away as heat. But this is a graphic example showing you what happens when you slow down from 35 miles per hour. If you hit a wall, you stopped at 0 miles an hour, and your car was destroyed. You're still stopping from 35 to 0, just that you're not hitting a wall. You're using the brakes, and you're throwing that amount of energy away. That's how much energy is given away when you brake hard. Fortunately, again, Priuses have regenerative braking, but we want to be gentle on that. We want to absorb as much of that energy as possible. By being a gentle braker, you're going to absorb more energy than this hard braker, which went from 35 to 0 and nothing, and that car's destroyed. Okay? So we've got driving without brakes. Think of your car, your Prius. Somehow you got in and the brakes didn't work today. Something was spongy or something didn't feel right. How would you change your driving habits if you still were going to drive that car to work regardless of any issue? Would you change your driving habits? I'm going to ask you. If your brakes didn't work, but you were still on the road, would you change your driving habits? Would you still drive 70 miles an hour down the interstate? That's right, you change them. That's what we want you to think about. Your brakes are fine, but if you put a drive without brakes mindset into you, you're going to change your driving habits into a much more anticipatory driver. You're going to become much more aware of what's ahead, and you're going to slow down before you have to get to an impediment.
The B gear and braking.
Don't recommend it.
Really?
I'll take you on the side as to why that is, but that's a little bit beyond this, okay? So driving without brakes, just put in your mindset, my brakes aren't working, how am I going to change my habit? I'm going to leave longer distances between me and the stoplight ahead that turned red, the car and trucks ahead. You know, we're just going to start to expand what we see ahead of us because we think our brakes are bad. Even though our brakes are fine, if you put yourself in that mindset, you will become a more efficient and a more aware driver. And it's the efficiency that kicks up, even in a Prius. By putting that mindset into your head, you'll get better fuel economy. 3 lights out anticipatory focus. And this works out really well in most cases. Think of going through 3 lights in a row and how many times we usually get stuck in the second one or the third one. You know, at middle of the night, it's not so bad. We usually know what road we need to be on to get through them. But sometimes when you're in a blind area, as many of us are when we're just driving in a new town like I did here in Yakima yesterday, I don't know what the light timing is. So what I try to do is I don't look at the first light ahead of me. I'm looking at the first, second, and third light ahead of me. And I'm looking at the cross traffic and are they slowing down because they got a yellow. I'm looking at the flashing walk signs to see if they're going to change that light for me. I'm looking at impediments ahead. What I want to do is pay attention 3 lights out, not just 1 light out. I don't pay attention to the car or 2 or 3 cars ahead of me. I'm trying to look out, you know, a quarter mile or more so that I can try to play my speed to get through all of those lights without ever having to stop. We've got more techniques for that. But by looking out 3 lights, you're going to find yourself more aware of people from the side, vehicles from the side, impediments. You're going to notice these flashing walk signs and how they're going to help. Hey, that light's going to turn green in 10 seconds. Should I race up to that light and stop, or should I just back off and coast and it'll turn green and then I run through at speed? Things like that. Anticipate instead of react. If you anticipate, you can possibly avoid an accident ahead. If you react, throw the dice. 3 lights out. Try to look at 3 lights out. Try to look a quarter to a half mile ahead. When I'm going down the interstate in a congested area of Chicago, I'm looking at the biggest truck I can find a half mile up. A half mile ahead, because what he's going through right now, I'll be there in 20 to 30 seconds. It gives me that much advance. If I see those brake lights on his truck 30 seconds ahead, I'm already off the gas because something's going on up there. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to coast or glide into it. Okay? Rabbit timing. And oh, how I love rabbits. Rabbits always win the race to the red light and they get the trophy, right? There's a big prize package at every light and somebody hands them a prize for winning the race to the red light. What we do is we take advantage of the rabbits. If you're coming up to a red light and you don't know if it's going to change, you know, it's red, but you don't know when the thing's going to change, and there's somebody around you, how about slowing down and letting him go by? What he's going to do is he's going to go up to that light, he's going to sit there, and he's going to trip it for you. So by the time you get there, it's green. Even in a Prius, you have regenerative braking. It's still best to go 40 miles an hour and stay at 40 than to go down to 20 or 0 and then go back up to 40. It's better in anything if we don't have to stop. Allow the rabbits to run. And this picture here, this was taken a few weeks ago. I was on 395, US 395 in Nevada. And what had happened is this whole conga line in the left lane there, they're all racing up to this red light. And it had just turned green. They're all stopped. They were side by side with me for half a mile, but they decided to race up to the red light. I was still going about 25 miles an hour here, and it turned green. I didn't have to stop. All those rabbits raced up to the red light, and they tripped the light for me. Thank goodness for rabbits. And when you go by them, like I did here, I waved and said thank you. It's always a great thing to have a rabbit pass you, stop at the light, and trip it for you. There was no prize for him, but there is a prize for you. Okay? Another anecdote here. I was with an NPR crew just 2 weeks ago in my hometown. There was a white Mercedes, and it was on a 2-lane, so it was 1 lane for heading in one direction. This Mercedes was stuck behind me, and I was rabbit timing and light timing a light up ahead. And the NPR crew, the lead, was in the, we had 5 in the car, and I was in a 2005 Honda Accord. We had 5 in the car, and he said, "Aren't you pissing this guy off in the Mercedes behind you?" I says, "This is the one time where I will piss him off. I will slow him down so I can get him and anybody behind him through the light ahead moving, because he doesn't know that I saved him fuel as well as myself." Now, right after that light, it turned into 4-lane. 2 lanes one direction, 2 lanes the other. And at that point, that SUV, you know, there's the Mercedes SUV, whatever, he took off and he's passing, he's maneuvering back and forth. He says, "Now we will use him as our rabbit." We went for 2.5 miles, and he got caught at light after light after light. But he tripped him for us. And the NPR crew was like, "There it is, there he goes." And I says, "Just watch this." He gets the red light, turns green 20 seconds later, we're right with him again. Boom, boom, boom. And I've done this countless of times with actual TV crews in the car, where some race guy, he's got, "Oh, I'm gonna win the race to the light. Good, go, woo, woo." And then boom, we're going by him and waving every time. And it happens again and again. Allow the rabbits to run, and you'd be surprised at how much they can save you fuel. Another way to look at it, rabbits come from the other side. You're going down the interstate, or you're going out, not interstate, but a suburban road, and there's a red light ahead, and you're going to get to a light, and there's nobody around you. But there's somebody coming from the other side, and they're racing to that light. Allow them to get there first. So they'll trip the light for you so you can go. It's just how to get through these impediments, saving fuel, and put yourself in a little game. to save fuel, and it really works. It takes a lot less stress off you too when you get to go by these guys that race past you like every single time. Okay, we have alternate routes, and what I did here is I pictured 3 different routes to get from my house to my bank. Depending on the car, depending on what kind of Prius I'm driving. If I'm driving a Camry hybrid or a Prius C, I will take different routes to lower my consumption overall, depending on the vehicle, because I know that in cold weather I need a longer warm-up hit, so I'll take the longer route, but it's more flat and less impediment. Or if I'm in a Camry hybrid versus a regular Prius, I take the longer route with more straight and less impediment route in the Camry hybrid than I would a Prius, because it's not as fuel efficient. It needs more time to warm up. Alternate routes are there for us, and I used to drive to a nuclear plant that I used to work at for 15 years. And even up to the last year that I drove that route, I was still finding alternate routes that saved you a little bit of fuel for whatever you need. And I'll give you one example. There was a classic backup around a corner, and there was what we call an oasis over the highway. It's where a McDonald's, and they have little library things up there, and then different food courts and things, and these oases. It's like a rest stop, but it's over the highway instead of off to the side. And there was always this backup that always occurred at the same spot every day at about the same time. So what I started doing, instead of going from 60 miles an hour, 55, and slowing to 0 and then playing in this stop-start kind of game, I used to take this half-mile off-ramp, go up through this Oasis parking lot at 10, 15 miles an hour, come down the backside, and get right back in at 10 to 15. I had a 1 mile long, after it's all said and done, I climbed up the hill and came down, 1 mile long where I didn't use any fuel. And yet all of this other stuff in this 1 mile lane, they were stop and crawl, stop and crawl, stop and crawl. They're getting 5 miles per gallon on average. I'm getting infinite by going up and around and then back down. And it's just something that, hey, it's there, so why not use it? If that is available to you, if it does lower your fuel consumption, I'm not saying shoot for the highest numbers, I'm saying go for the lowest fuel consumption. If a route that takes 35 miles versus one that's 10, take the 10-mile route, even though it may be less fuel efficient, it's lower consumption. So we have to put that into our mindset as well. But we all have alternates that we can take. Okay, smart braking. And this goes into how we're going to handle those rabbits and how we're going to handle lights. Now I want you to consider something. I'm going from 40 miles per hour, there's a red light at the corner, I'm going 40, 30, 20, 10, 0. And then it turns green. 0, 10, 20, 30, 40. What happens, instead of being 40 to 0, I was back here, I went 40, 30, 20, 20, 20, maybe 10. Light turns green, I'm 10, 20, 30, 40. I'm right back up to 40. I never stopped fully. What I did is I went from 40 down to 20 here because I knew that light was not, I was not going to make that light. By slowing down to 20 miles per hour here and then kind of gliding from 20 down to 10, I caught the green light. But if I just use my brakes all the way down from 40 down to 0, 0 miles an hour, I have to start from 0, that's a bad thing. I used brakes smartly. I had to use them, but I used them smartly. I slowed down from 40 to 20 right here. 20 miles an hour, 20, 20, 18, 16, green light, 16, 18, 20, 40 miles an hour. That's all that smart braking is use your brakes smartly when you have to. It's a technique that works wonderfully, and especially with those rabbits, they're gonna be racing by you like, go trip it, I'm gonna smart brake here, I'll go right by at 20, 25 miles an hour every single time. Using basic and intermediate techniques, we just took our cost of fuel to drive a given distance from $4 a gallon down to $2.50. If there was a gas station here in Yakima at $2.50, people would be coming in from Seattle to fill there. It wouldn't be efficient, but they'd do it. You have that capability in you, even by driving a Prius from, instead of 40, 45 or 50, 55, 70, 75, in his case 80, 85. But you have the ability, even with Priuses, to pay this kind of rate versus what the other average Prius driver drives. Prius is great. It gets great fuel economy. We can up that just by changing the driving habits that we use every day. Now we're talking about some advanced stuff, and this is where I'd like you to all kind of move up here because these screens are very important for both Prius Gen 2 and Gen 3 owners. Toyota has given us one heck of a wonderful weapon at reducing our fuel consumption. But we can take advantage of what they've given us and go further on the same amount of fuel. And the one key, if there's one key you pull from this little seminar that we're giving, it's called the Glide. The Glide is what gives everybody huge fuel economy numbers, no matter what they own and drive. And what that is in a Prius, you want to be going down the road, slowing down or maintaining speed without using any fuel, right? And a Prius does do that. But we want to extend that as far as possible. And what I'm showing here is a Gen 2 energy, or the energy screen, the flow of energy through the car. We're going down the road at 30 or 40 miles an hour there, whatever it is, and there's no arrows anywhere. You're like, well, where's the arrows? You have to show some battery power going somewhere, or the engine driving the wheels. No, we don't want anything. We want that car to go down the road, and we don't want to use the battery pack. We don't want to use the engine. We just want it to go down the road and glide. It's the most fuel efficient way to get big numbers in the Prius, and you can do this anytime you slow down. If you have enough plan, if you look far enough ahead and you know you're going to slow down, you can glide to a stop. A Prius will glide for 3/4 of a mile from 50, 60 miles an hour. If you have that 3/4 miles an hour or 3/4 mile distance to do that, you watch that fuel consumption display and it starts ticking up. It ticks up and ticks up. Coming down a mountain, you can do the same thing. You can glide. You don't have to use power. You don't have to regenerate. Let it glide, because you will go further on lower or less fuel than if you were to use the built-in systems of the Prius. It's great that it's there, but we want to go further. The Glide is the key. To go and coast without using any fuel, without putting any battery power, or putting any power back in the pack, without using any battery power, without using the engine, without shutting the engine off. We want to get that thing to glide and not use any energy, or as a limited amount as possible.
What about using neutral?
We'll go into neutral in just a little bit. You'll see the technique.
You don't want to use cruise control when you're doing a glide.
No, cruise control will force that engine, and it'll force it to keep more power, and then you'll go on your brakes after that and use regen, which you don't want to do. Okay, so all it does is it shows on your Gen 2 Priuses no arrows when you're going down the road.
How do you do that?
Use your foot, and you can balance between regenerative braking with power going to the battery or battery power coming out. You can balance with your foot, or we can use neutral. Okay?
I've got a question.
Sure.
What about the Prius V? Is that a generation 2?
It's ahead, and we've got some stuff for you in just a little bit. I've got some Gen 2 screens and I've got Gen 3 screens here. But what I'm showing here, and I know it's really tough to see, but I'm accelerating a Gen 2 Prius here at 16 miles per gallon. I'm accelerating a Prius 2 at 40 miles per gallon. I'm actually accelerating this car at 40 miles per gallon. So what's going to happen on the glide portion? When I go, let's say I go from 0 to 40 and I'm getting 40 miles per gallon during acceleration. I go up to 40 miles an hour, and now I glide down to 0. I've got 80 miles per gallon coming into me. Over here, I'm going to get about 30, 40 miles per gallon. You can accelerate these cars almost to their EPA. And this is a prime example of the choice that you have. By watching your displays, you can accelerate more efficiently. It might take you a little longer, but it doesn't take like 2 minutes. It just take a few more seconds, allow a few more seconds, and use your fuel consumption displays to provide you with the feedback needed to accelerate your car more efficiently. If there's cars behind you, or if there's traffic conditions or impediments that you have to go, there is a go pedal. Hit it. Do what you have to there. But consider when you don't have to hit that go pedal. Take it easy. Accelerate at 40 miles per gallon versus 16. The rest of everybody out there, they're accelerating at 5 to 10 miles per gallon. At least you're in a Prius, but you can do even more. And this is a prime example. Went past it tonight. Yeah, this is a prime example of 2 ways to accelerate the Prius properly using the Gen 2 screens. And you can use your Gen 3 screens by looking at your fuel consumption display. And it's a little bar graph along the side of the speedometer. And you can tell how hard you're accelerating. Are you going to accelerate at 20 miles per gallon? Are you going to accelerate at 25? Are you going to accelerate at 40 miles per gallon? It's your choice. If there's no impediments behind you, those little percentages add up. How you accelerate that car to speed. And it happens again and again from every single light, stop sign, through every impediment, from the grocery store, from the way you leave your house. Every time you accelerate, you have a choice of getting either 40 or 15. And this just goes to show that you do have the vehicle and you do have the capability, you have the screens available to use. So when you can, accelerate more efficiently. Okay, this one is a Gen 3 screen. This is a Gen 2 screen, and this was a record that we set in a Gen 2. We went 1,300 miles on a single tank of fuel at 110 miles per gallon in Pittsburgh. This one here is just I did this at a press launch. They were doing a fuel economy challenge, and it was around town. I said, well, I'll peg the meters, and that's what you get. But by accelerating gently and gliding where I could, that's where you get these numbers, okay? And there's a little bit more advanced techniques that we can show you, and we're going to show them to you in the next few slides. Okay, warp stealth. Priuses, all Camry hybrids, all the Lexus GS and HS and CTs, they can warp stealth. What this is a way to go down a mountain and not use any fuel, but yet maintain speed. You're not regenerating energy to put back in the pack. It's just enough slope to kind of maintain your speed, but if you were to let off the gas and regenerate, it would slow you down, and you don't want to slow down, you have to maintain speed, right? Well, you want to go to this, what's called warp stealth. And you can do this with your foot. And this one is where the clinics are going to show you how to do this real time in your vehicle. So I highly recommend that you sign up for clinics over the next 2 days so I can show you how to do this in practice. But all it is you're at highway speed. You're above 41 in the Prius Gen 2 or the Prius Gen 3, above 45. The engine's still spinning over, but it's not using any fuel, or it's using such a small amount it's almost immeasurable. But you're maintaining speed going down any slight hill or even on a flat area. You put yourself in a warp stealth at 45 miles an hour, and you use a little bit of battery to maintain your speed, but you only use a little amount of this, and it will show up as battery power coming to the wheels, even though the engine's still spinning over. It's just not using any fuel. And again, I'd love to get you guys in the clinics to show you this on your own screen and how this works or how it feels for the different generations. It makes a huge difference. For maybe you can warp stealth for a half a mile. That's a half mile you didn't use any fuel versus either regenerating and slowing down and then having to accelerate with the gas engine. This is a big deal, and that's why I highly recommend you sign up for the clinics. Okay, we got warp neutral. This one you have to be careful on. The specs on some of the internal hardware for the Priuses and for the Camry hybrid and for the Prius family, they stop at about 62 miles an hour in this warp neutral mode. That means this particular small motor is spinning backwards so fast that it can literally destroy itself. Prius is up to 41 miles per hour for Gen 2, Gen 3 up to 45 miles an hour, no problem. Engine can be shut off at 0 RPM and you can be going down the road, no issue whatsoever. Above that, however, you can use warp neutral, and this is what you use for going down these slopes on the mountains when you head to Seattle. You crest a mountain at 44 miles per hour in a Gen 3. Crest the top in a truck climbing lanes. It's in EV mode, swap to neutral, and then let the mountain pick your speed back up. But do not go over 62 miles an hour. Okay, that 62 mile per hour is critical. And this is it's an intermediate advanced technique here. If you go over 62, you won't cause any problems immediately, but I have seen a damaged Lexus HS. Somebody was doing 90 down a mountain in California for over 15 minutes. And he cooked MG1, and it cost him some bucks. You don't want to do that. This is for 40 to 62 miles per hour. Once you hit 62, drop back in neutral and then, or into drive, and start regenerating or drive it like you normally would down that mountains. But you crest below 45, get into EV, swap to neutral, and then start your downhill. And you're going to pick up speed quick, because these slopes out here are up to 6% grade. It's going to pick up quick. And then once you get to 62, drop it and drive. Engine starts spinning, but it's not burning any fuel, and you will be regenerating after that. But for that short amount of period, it's just wide open glide. You're just flying down the road. And in many cases, there's slopes that are small enough where you can get from 60 all the way down to 0. And you can glide for over a mile in this condition by using warp neutral. But you have to start below 45 use it downhill to accelerate yourself to whatever it will accelerate, but do not go over 62 miles an hour. This is a very advanced technique in some realms, and around in the mountains, you have to be careful with it. We're going to show you how to do that in the clinics, but I'm also going to always give you these caveats and why and where you use those. Our next one, superhighway mode. Okay, I think the picture here is 555 miles at 70.9 miles per gallon, and my average speed was 53 miles per hour. This was a highway run. This was cooking, and this was between Chicago, and I was on my way to New York for another event drive. The Prius can get 70 miles per gallon out on the highway, and at high average speeds. But you have to use this superhighway mode. You're like, what's this superhighway mode? We actually use these devices to get ourselves into a specific ignition timing where the Prius will give you like this 70 and 80 mile per gallon going down the interstate. But it doesn't stay there, but it's there for when you can use it. And you have to use more instrumentation than your car has in it. But this is what it's superhighway mode. You set in the Prius Gen 2, ignition 14, it'll stay at 70 miles per gallon all day long on the interstate. It's not a fast speed. You know, you're traveling between 45 and 60 in a drive with load as hills and valleys come up, but it will give you 70 all day long. The Prius Gen 3 is a little harder, but its ignition timing is 21. You want to set yourself up so you're going down the interstate at 55, 60 miles an hour, you see ignition 21, and then leave it down, even if you have to droop down to 50. Your car is capable of this, but this is an advanced technique and you need more instrumentation to get to it. Okay, using all the hypermiling techniques that we've given you so far, you've gone from $4 a gallon to $2 a gallon gasoline to drive the same distance. I'm not saying that you're going to take your 50 mile per gallon Prius and get 100 miles per gallon out of it every time, but I am saying that 100 miles per gallon is available to you when you can put that into practice. And if that means around town, especially around town, because that's where everybody's racing up the lights, the Prius loves around town. That's where you get the big 70s, 80s, 90s, and 100 mile per gallon out of your Priuses. And when I drove the Prius at the Fuel Economy Championships in 2008, it offered 136 miles per gallon on a 20-mile round-trip loop. That's big numbers. And the only reason is because I got to use the hybrid drivetrain exactly as it should be used. Everything was optimized at that point, and I'm not expecting everybody to get 136. But there are periods when you will get 136 miles per gallon just in a quick pulse and glide or something that works with lights. It's available to you. When you can, use it. I'm not saying all the time, but if there's traffic flow, you want to be anti-wave against that traffic. You want to build the gaps as they're speeding up, close them as they're slowing down, and you just continuously anti-wave that thing, and you're pulse and gliding yourself to 100 miles per gallon, and they're getting 5. The Prius can do that, and it's automatic. Just change the way that you drive. Imagine $2 a gallon gas today. You know, I mean, people, it'd be all over the news in New York. People would say, we're going to move out to Washington to get $2 gas. It's in you, even in a Prius. You can pay $2 for fuel that you paid $4 to drive the same distance today. Here is a Gen 3. This was a press car, and I was coming back from an event in Dearborn. And what I did is, at what we call the Circle, in downtown Chicago, the Dan Ryan, the Eisenhower, and the Kennedy all come in and merge in one massive ball of mess of traffic congestion. It's the Circle in downtown Chicago. From that point, I was in a stop and crawl with a million other people in Chicago at rush hour. I reset the instruments right there, and I went for a drive to my house, which is a little over 40 miles away. Although the displays are hard to see, and if anyone want to see these, they're in PowerPoint. You can see them on my laptop after the presentation. But I was maintaining over 99 miles per gallon, 99.9 miles per gallon, for this entire route until one little segment. I'm 8 miles out on the first picture. I think I'm 16 out on the second one. I'm still at 100 miles per gallon. This is Chicago traffic, where everybody's getting 10. The Prius is giving me over 100 at this point, just because of the way that I'm driving. And they're not getting any further distance ahead of me than I am of them. This next one, I'm still at 100 until that bottom one there. There was a 2-mile backup. An accident happened at a light 2 miles ahead. Prius only has about 1.5 miles to 2 miles of electric capability, and you really don't want to use that. A lot of people think you want to use electric, you want to use electric. You don't. You want to glide and you want to pulse. You want to accelerate and then glide. You want to accelerate, glide. You don't really want to use the battery except where it's absolutely needed, like driving around in a parking lot. Then you want to use electric. But you want to accelerate efficiently, and then you want to let it glide, and it is easy to do in a Prius, and especially in the clinics. I'm going to show you how to do this. It's so easy. You're going to say, oh, I've been driving this car different. I should have changed this years ago. Anyways, I hit this 2-mile backup. Now I'm down to 94.7, and I'm in the middle of it. 94.7, and everybody else is down to 3 or 4. I'm in a Prius, I'm at 94.7. That's not so bad, right? I get to my house, I'm at 87 miles per gallon. From downtown traffic, this is rush hour traffic. I get home, I'm at 87 miles per gallon, about 82 actual, in a car rated at 50 miles per gallon. And this, I was with traffic the whole way. It's just I changed the way that I drove the Prius. And it's so easy to do it. Anybody can do it. And you don't have to do it all the time, but sometimes it just absolutely makes sense that I should be gliding here. I shouldn't be accelerating and then hitting the brakes and grab a regen. I should just be gliding here. This is the kind of results that anybody can get. And this was just a normal run from downtown Chicago at rush hour to my house. And the Prius is a machine. It really does a good job. The next one is the Prius V. This was the launch in Half Moon Bay. And I took, fortunately, when I go to these press launches, you go on these scripted routes, and you get to drive and get drive impressions with 100 other journalists from Car and Driver, Motor Trend, Consumer Reports, New York Times, whoever. And afterwards, I always try to get an hour to 2 hours with the vehicle by myself. After the day's over, after all the journalists are done, sometimes Toyota allows me to take these vehicles out, and I top them off. I spend about 20 minutes shaking the car top and shaking top until I get that thing right to the edge, seal it up, and then go. And I try to take them on, 50, 100 mile route in a round trip. This Prius V, its fuel consumption display, I drove this from Half Moon Bay to San Jose, and I looped San Jose and came about a quarter way back. And it offers 67 miles per gallon. This is a 44 mile per gallon rated car. I got 67 out of it. After the measured top off, it was 66.8. It's that close. The fuel consumption display is really close. But that's a Prius V. That's their lowest fuel economy vehicle, okay? The lowest fuel economy Prius is the Prius V. And on this highway route to San Jose and back, offered 67. I want to show you the next slide here. The top slide is what this Prius V I drove from SeaTac out to the parking lot here yesterday. And I snapped this picture, and it's 63.1 miles per gallon, so about 62.5 miles per gallon from SeaTac, climbing all the mountain roads. From cold, I picked it up from a parking lot, it was sitting there overnight, and it allowed 63, so about 62.5 miles per gallon. And that's climbing from about 400 foot where I picked it up, over the different mountain passes, including that 3,000 foot one. And then I think we're about 1,200 here according to Google Maps. So I gained about 800 foot elevation, and I still got 63.1. That bottom slide is a Hyundai Sonata Hybrid. And the reason why I put it there is I did a drive out of San Diego, and I crossed the country only filling it up once. But by climbing the mountains, I had to climb over 4,000 foot and then drop down to 0 feet. So this is a gain of about 400 absolute feet downhill for this car to drive this distance. And it's at 59.6, or about 59 miles per gallon. So these were very similar routes. One's 100 miles and the other's 160 something. The Prius V traveled 160 miles at 63.1, 62.5. The Hyundai Sonata Hybrid, I traveled 102 miles and I'm at 59.6. The reason why I mentioned the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid here, because last fall I took its brethren, the Kia Optima Hybrid, which uses the same drivetrain, to a 48 state fuel economy world record at 64.5 miles per gallon, going through all 48 states. The Prius V, the lowest fuel economy vehicle in the Prius family, beat the Hyundai Sonata Hybrid. It beat the Kia Optima Hybrid, which I took on a 48 state fuel economy world record. That's their lowest fuel economy vehicle. Imagine what your Prius hatch, Prius plug-in, or the Prius C will do. Big numbers here. We're talking, if I had the opportunity, I'd love to take a Prius C on a 48 state run because the numbers would be explosive. Here's the Prius C. This was San Diego, and again, press launch after the fact. I took it out, topped off, filled up, and this is the one you may have seen the picture in the advertisement that they put up for this. On an all-highway route, the thing offered 85 miles per gallon. I was shocked because I was thinking, oh, it's got less EPA. It's only 46 highway versus the Prius Gen 3 at 48. Forget the EPA on this baby. This Prius C offered 85 miles per gallon on I-5. One of the most aggressive group of drivers in the country drive I-5 in California every day. And I was amongst the middle of it. And this thing offered 85 miles per gallon. And it's rated at 50. You know, this is a highway drive. Take this off into the city route, it's going to blow through 100 miles per gallon without sitting still by using these techniques. And it just goes to show you what kind of weapon that the Prius family offers. And when this was just a few months ago, and I was just shocked at what this thing did. And even the average journalist that was there, only 2 of them finished below 50, and we're talking San Diego with 15% grades in some cases. That's how steep these hills were on this route that we had. And even these hot, car and driver and motor trend road and track type guys, they were still busting through 50 pretty easy. That's how good these Priuses are. And then I want to talk a little about longevity. We're getting close to the end here. This is Andrew Grant. He was a taxi cab driver. He had a Gen 1, punched through 200,000 miles on it, on his Gen 1. Toyota bought it back home, gave him a Gen 2 for free. He punched over 200,000 miles out of that. No issues. He just changed oil, tires. That's it. A friend of mine, Jesse, he's from Massachusetts. This car had 349,500 miles on it when he got T-boned at an intersection 3 Christmases ago. The only thing he had done to it is tires and oil change. After that, he bought a Gen 2, a used Gen 2 with 84,000. He just went through 305,000 on that now. Oil change and tires. These things last and last and last. Hybrids, it's your choice. Fortunately, you guys have, you've seen the light. You get from point A to point B just as comfortable as anybody else. You have a lot of toys and, Bluetooth and nice radio and heated seats in some cases. And you're saving fuel by doing it. And we just showed you a few more ways to save even more. And it's all up to you. So that's the good thing. It's all within us to get better fuel efficiency, but at least you guys are on the right track by owning the Prius to begin with. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing so.